She was invisible. For 3 years, she cleaned marble floors while the man who signed her paychecks barely knew her name. She came from nothing. She had nothing. But in one single moment, one impossible moment, she had everything to lose and still chose to risk it all. This is the story of how a poor maid saved a billionaire's life with a kiss that changed everything, a kiss that shocked the world. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Meet Sarah Mitchell. 28 years old, working her 7th job in as many years. By day, she wore a black uniform and an invisible cloak. By night, she counted every dollar twice to make sure she could send money home to her mother. Her mom had been sick for so long that Sarah couldn't remember what she looked like when she smiled anymore. The cancer treatments were expensive. Very expensive. The medical bills never stopped coming. Sarah's father had abandoned them years ago, leaving behind nothing but broken promises and an empty house. Her older brother had his own family to worry about, so it fell to Sarah. Always to Sarah. 3 years of cleaning, cooking, organizing other people's lives while her own fell apart in slow motion. She worked at the Ashford estate, 47 rooms spread across 15 acres of perfectly maintained property. The owner was Adrian Cole, a 42-year-old real estate and hotel magnate worth somewhere north of $3 billion. Sarah had seen him maybe 100 times in 3 years. He would walk past her in the hallway without acknowledging her existence. Sometimes he would snap his fingers at her from across a room. More coffee. Fix that painting. The kitchen floor has a mark on it. She would nod, smile politely, and disappear. That was her job. That was her life. The other staff members didn't make it easier. They mocked her worn shoes, her patched uniform, the lunch she brought from home in a plastic container. They whispered about her desperation, her sick mother, her impossible situation. But Sarah didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. She needed this job more than she needed dignity. That was the terrible mathematics of poverty that nobody ever talked about. So she worked quietly. She stayed out of the way. She became so good at being invisible that sometimes she forgot she was there at all. She would clean Adrian Cole's private study late at night, her hands moving automatically over leather-bound books and mahogany furniture, and she would imagine what it felt like to live in a world where money wasn't a constant panic. She would imagine what her mother could have been if she had been born into a different life. She would imagine a lot of things, but she never imagined what was coming. 3 months before the incident, Adrian Cole's behavior changed. Sarah noticed it first, because noticing things was one of the few skills she had perfected. Strange men started appearing at the mansion. They wore expensive suits, but they moved like soldiers. Their eyes were always scanning, always watching. They communicated in whispers. Adrian's usual circle of wealthy friends and business associates stopped visiting. In their place came security consultants, lawyers, and people who looked like they were used to solving violent problems. Sarah heard fragments of conversations as she cleaned nearby rooms. Words like hostile takeover, corporate espionage, and dangerous rival floated through the air like smoke. She tried not to listen. She really did. But sometimes your ears work whether you want them to or not. Adrian's cousin had been visiting frequently. His name was Marcus Cole, and Sarah didn't trust him. There was something about the way he looked at Adrian, something hungry and bitter mixed together. Marcus was a venture capitalist who had lost everything in a failed investment years earlier. Rumor had it that Adrian had refused to bail him out. Marcus had never forgotten. He had never forgiven. Sarah watched him shake Adrian's hand in the foyer one afternoon, and the grip lasted just a second too long. The smile was too wide. The eyes were too empty. She felt a chill run down her spine, but she said nothing. Who was she to speak? Who would listen to the maid's instincts anyway? She didn't have proof. She had only the small voice in her gut screaming that something was wrong. Something was very wrong. 1 week before everything changed, Sarah found a small notebook in the east hallway. It had been left on the windowsill behind a plant. She almost didn't notice it, but something made her look. The pages were filled with notes, names, dates, times, security schedules, photographs of the property. Her hands shook as she read. One page had Adrian's daily routine written out in meticulous detail. Another had a detailed floor plan of the mansion with certain areas marked in red. She recognized the handwriting. It belonged to Daniel, one of the new security guards Adrian had hired just 2 months earlier. A man who had seemed so legitimate, so professional. A man nobody questioned. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She knew what this meant. She knew. This was a plan. This was preparation. This was danger. She did what she thought was right. She took the notebook to the head of security, a man named Mr. Patterson. She walked into his office with trembling hands and showed him what she had found. His reaction was not what she expected. He laughed. He actually laughed. "Sarah, you're seeing things that aren't there. This is probably just Daniel taking notes on property details. You're being paranoid. Go back to work." She tried to explain. She tried to make him understand the significance of what she had found, but he dismissed her completely. As she left his office, she heard him on the phone. She heard him tell someone that the maid had brought him some nonsense about security concerns. He heard him laugh again. She realized in that moment that she had made a terrible mistake. She had shown her hand. She had made an enemy out of someone powerful. She had made herself vulnerable. Now Sarah faced an impossible decision. Should she tell Adrian Cole directly, the man who barely knew her name? The man who had never treated her as anything but part of the furniture? The afternoon was bright and clear. It was a Friday in spring, and the kind of day that made you think that maybe, just maybe, life was going to be okay. Adrian Cole had a meeting with a potential buyer for one of his signature hotel properties. The buyer was coming from overseas. This was a major deal, hundreds of millions of dollars on the line. After the meeting concluded at around 5 o'clock, Adrian walked his visitor to the front entrance of the mansion. They shook hands, smiled, made small talk about future plans. The visitor left. Sarah was in the parlor, dusting baseboards and picture frames. She had positioned herself there deliberately. She wanted to be near. She wanted to see. She wanted to somehow protect a man who would never know her name. Adrian made his way down the front steps toward the circular driveway where his car was waiting. The driver stood outside the vehicle, ready to open the door. It was a perfect day. The sun was starting to set, casting golden light across the manicured lawns. Sarah watched from the window. She was not supposed to be watching. She was supposed to be invisible. But something made her press her face closer to the glass. Something made her hold her breath. That was when she saw it, a tiny red dot, a laser sight. It appeared on Adrian's chest, just over his heart, and her entire body went cold. Time stopped. Her brain seemed to freeze. Her lungs forgot how to breathe. Years of helplessness and silence and powerlessness suddenly crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity. This was it. This was the thing her instincts had been screaming about. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She didn't hesitate or doubt or wonder what might happen. She ran. Her legs carried her through the parlor, down the corridor, through the entryway, and out onto the front steps. She ran harder than she had ever run in her life. Adrian was still walking toward his car, completely unaware, completely vulnerable. She could see the red dot still there, tracking him like a hunter tracking prey. She moved faster. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion and fast forward at the same time. Her heart was pounding. Her breath was tearing from her throat. She was 50 feet away, 40 feet, 30. And then she was there. She reached him. She didn't think about what she was doing. She didn't calculate the consequences. She simply grabbed his face with both her hands and pulled him toward her, and she kissed him. It happened in less than a second. A kiss that wasn't romantic. a kiss that was desperate and clumsy and born from pure survival instinct. The motion knocked Adrian off balance. It pulled his body to the side, just enough, just exactly enough. A shot rang out, not from far away, from close, from somewhere in the trees at the edge of the property. The bullet that was meant for Adrian's heart instead hit the stone pillar behind him. The impact sent a spray of dust and debris into the air. Adrian stumbled backward, shock and confusion written all over his face. Sarah was still holding on to him, her eyes wide, her breath coming in ragged gasps. For one eternal moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them understood exactly what had just happened. The estate erupted into chaos. Security personnel came running from every direction. Sirens began to wail in the distance. Voices were shouting. Radios were crackling with urgent messages. Adrian stood there, his hand to his chest, his eyes locked on Sarah's face. She was still standing in front of him, her black uniform disheveled, her hair coming loose from its pins, her heart still racing so fast she thought she might collapse. "What did you do?" Adrian demanded. His voice was sharp, confused, angry. "Why did you just—" But he didn't finish his sentence. Because he saw it then. He saw the fresh mark on the stone pillar behind him. He saw the trajectory of the bullet. He understood. He understood what would have happened if Sarah hadn't done what she did. He understood that he was alive because of the maid he had never bothered to learn the name of. Within minutes, the police arrived. The FBI arrived. Emergency response teams swept through the property. In the trees at the edge of the grounds, they found a shooter, a man named Victor Chen, hired by someone else to eliminate Adrian Cole. They found the rifle. They found the magazine. They found the perfect vantage point he had been waiting at since early morning. When they reviewed the security footage, they saw exactly what had happened. They saw Sarah. They saw her sudden appearance. They saw the kiss. They saw the bullet hit the pillar. They saw the impossible act of heroism performed by a woman in a cleaning uniform. The evidence was so clear, so obvious, that there was no room for doubt or interpretation. Sarah Mitchell had saved Adrian Cole's life. She had saved him with nothing but instinct and courage and a willingness to risk everything for a stranger. The FBI questioned Sarah for hours. They wanted to know everything. How did she know what was going to happen? How did she know the exact moment to run out there? How did she know where the shot would come from? Sarah told them about the notebook. She told them about Daniel. She told them about Mr. Patterson dismissing her concerns. She told them about the feeling in her gut that something was terribly wrong. The agents took notes. They nodded. They treated her with respect and seriousness for the first time in her life. She realized that heroism, actual, genuine heroism, could make people see you differently. Fear and gratitude could cut through all the social barriers that usually kept people like her invisible. The investigation unfolded like a dark story. Daniel, the security guard, had been hired specifically to gather intelligence on Adrian's daily routines and security protocols. He was working with Victor Chen, the shooter. Victor Chen was working with a mysterious figure who was paying them very large amounts of money. That figure turned out to be Marcus Cole, Adrian's own cousin, the man who had lost everything, the man who carried a grudge like a poison in his veins. Marcus had become convinced that he deserved his share of the Cole family fortune. He had convinced himself that Adrian stood between him and the wealth that should have been his. He had decided that the only solution was to have his cousin killed. He had planned it carefully. He had spent money. He had been patient. And he had failed because of a poor maid in a black uniform. Adrian Cole did something no one expected. He immediately fired Mr. Patterson, the security head who had dismissed Sarah's warning. He promoted Sarah to the position of his personal assistant. The role came with a significant salary increase, benefits, and security clearance. More importantly, it came with the recognition that her instincts and her courage had value. Sarah's life began to change, but she refused to let the money corrupt her. The first thing she did was schedule her mother for the best cancer treatment available, specialists, new protocols, hope, real tangible hope, that her mother might actually beat this disease. She rented a small apartment for her mother close to the hospital. She hired a nurse to care for her during the day. She made sure her mother never spent another moment worrying about money or medical bills. The media got hold of the story. Maid saves billionaire's life. The invisible hero. Rags to riches. Every news outlet ran variations of the headline. Sarah found herself on television shows. People magazine wanted to photograph her. There were offers for book deals and movie options. But the strangest part was how people treated her differently now. People who had ignored her or mocked her before now wanted to befriend her. They wanted to be associated with her heroism. They wanted to feel like they were standing close to something noble and good. Sarah realized that the world didn't value her differently because she was suddenly a better person. She was the same person she had always been. The world valued her differently because she had been useful to someone rich and powerful. What nobody expected was what happened next. As weeks turned into months, Adrian Cole began to see Sarah differently. He spent hours with her now. She organized his schedule. She sat in meetings with him. She advised him on decisions. She spoke her mind. And Adrian listened. He listened to someone he had ignored for 3 years. He heard thoughts and perspectives he had never heard before because he had never bothered to listen. Sarah's understanding of people was intuitive. She knew what it felt like to struggle. She knew what it felt like to have nothing. She knew what it felt like to be invisible. This gave her an insight that Adrian's wealthy circle could never have. She pushed him to make better decisions. She pointed out ethical complications in deals that Adrian's lawyers had glossed over. She made him want to be a better person. 6 months after the shooting, Adrian did something that shocked everyone. He announced a new charitable foundation in Sarah's name, the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Healthcare Access. It was funded with $50 million of Adrian's personal wealth. The foundation would provide free cancer treatment to people who couldn't afford it. It would sponsor medical research. It would help people like Sarah's mother, people who had fallen through the cracks of the American healthcare system. When Adrian made the announcement, he did something else that nobody expected. He looked directly at the camera and he said, "I'm a billionaire because of luck and timing and the advantages I was born with. Sarah Mitchell is a hero because she chose to be one when it would have been easier not to be." The world told her she was invisible. She was anything but. Adrian used his platform. He used his money. He used his influence to change the narrative. He used it to make Sarah matter. So here's what I want to know. Here's what I want you to think about. If you had been in Sarah's position, would you have run out to save someone who had never even learned your name? Someone who had treated you with indifference? Someone who had benefited from a system that kept you struggling just to survive? Would you have risked your life? Would you have risked your job? Would you have risked the fragile stability you had managed to build? That's a hard question. That's the kind of question that makes you have to look at yourself very honestly, because most of us like to think we would be brave in a crisis. Most of us like to think we would do the right thing, but the truth is that most of us have never had to truly test that belief. What about if you were Adrian Cole? If you spent 3 years working with someone, 3 years walking past them in hallways, 3 years benefiting from their labor, and you never once bothered to learn their name, what would that say about you? What would that tell you about your own character? And when Sarah saved your life, when you realized that your survival depended on the instinct and courage of someone you had treated as invisible, how would that change you? Adrian Cole's transformation is not a Disney movie. It's real. It's messy. It's the slow, difficult process of recognizing your own blindness and then trying desperately to see clearly. Sarah's mother is still alive. She beat the cancer. She still talks about the day her daughter came home and told her that her life had saved a billionaire. She laughed and cried at the same time. She said to Sarah, "I knew you had something special in you. I always knew you had a hero inside you. You just needed the right moment to let her out." But here's what I think is the most important part of this story. The part that will haunt you long after you finish watching. Sarah Mitchell didn't save Adrian Cole's life because she was trying to change her circumstances. She didn't do it because she was secretly in love with him or hoping that he would reward her. She did it because when she was faced with a moment where someone was about to die, she couldn't not act. She couldn't stay invisible. She couldn't keep pretending that the world and its injustices weren't her responsibility. She acted purely because it was the right thing to do. The rewards came later. The recognition came later. The transformation of her life came later. But in that moment on the steps, all that mattered was that a human being was about to be killed. And she couldn't let that happen. That's what heroism actually is. It's not calculated. It's not strategic. It's not about personal gain or advancement. It's about choosing to act when doing nothing would be easier. Adrian Cole used his platform and his resources to honor what Sarah had done. But Sarah had honored herself first by simply being the kind of person who would risk everything to save a stranger. That's the part of this story that should stick with you. That's the part that should make you examine your own life. That's the part that should make you ask yourself who you are when nobody is watching. Who you are when there are no cameras and no rewards and no recognition. Are you the kind of person who sees something wrong and speaks up? Are you the kind of person who risks comfort for integrity? Are you the kind of person who stays invisible when speaking could make a difference? These are the questions that Sarah Mitchell's story forces us to ask ourselves, and they don't have easy answers, but they're the questions that matter most. Marcus Cole is in prison. Daniel is in prison. Victor Chen is in prison. They are paying the price for planning violence. But Sarah and Adrian have moved forward. Adrian donated an additional $100 million to cancer research. He restructured his entire business to ensure fair treatment and fair wages for his employees. He learned the names of everyone who worked for him. He listened to their ideas. He treated them like they mattered. Because they do. They all matter. Every person matters. The housekeeper matters. The gardener matters. The security guard matters. The CEO matters too, but not more. Not more than the people who clean his home and prepare his food and keep his property running. Sarah Mitchell taught Adrian Cole something that no amount of money could have purchased. She taught him how to see other people, how to really see them, how to recognize the humanity in everyone around him, regardless of their job or their income or their social status. That might be the greatest gift that she gave him, greater than saving his life. So what do you think? What would you have done in Sarah's position? What would you have done if you were Adrian Cole? How would you feel if you discovered that the person you had been invisible to was suddenly the person whose presence had changed everything? How would you feel if the person who had treated you as invisible suddenly had to face the fact that your courage had made you the most visible person in the room? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know where you're watching from. Tell us how this story made you feel. Tell us if there's someone in your own life that you've been treating as invisible. Because Sarah Mitchell's story is a reminder that heroism exists everywhere, that courage can come from anyone, that the person you're looking past in the hallway might be the person who saves your life, that your life could change forever in a moment you never saw coming. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any more stories like this one. Stories that matter. Stories that make us think about who we are and who we want to become. Thank you for watching.